My name's Margie, and in 1995 I had the privilege to spend a whole year living in Commonwealth Bay at Cape Denison in a small hut. And the hut was not much bigger than this table area, I suppose about the same size as your average bathroom. To actually sail down to Commonwealth Bay and approach it from a yacht, you felt like you'd done, paid your penance to go through the Southern Ocean. So you're arriving on the shores of Commonwealth Bay and there's this spray and all the water's instantly freezing onto you, and then you step ashore and you go, wow, this is what Mawson and his men did, all those years ago. And then we went about building our own hut. So Mawson had his prefabbed hut, we had our prefabbed hut. He had a crew that set him all up and then they sailed off. We had our crew that set up the hut and then sailed off and left us. And then we were just sitting there alone to live out the adventure of the year, not knowing what was going to happen. And they were the same conditions that Mawson had of, he didn't know what he was going to do. He had the planned idea of all the scientific programs that he wanted to get done that year. I suppose we had the privilege of, we had all the modern day clothing, whereas Mawson was wearing, really thin clothes. So he wouldn't have had the comforts that we actually had. The wind would be blowing 100 knots and probably the daily average would be 80 knots. But Webb would still go out and he would go to the magnetograph hut and he would take the readings. I remember looking at that, in the diaries and going, there's no way I would go out there and do that. It was life-threatening. And we had sophisticated equipment, they had basic equipment, so your heart and respect for the men is just incredible because they did it so hard, we did it so soft. And, people say, oh, wow, you lived in Antarctica for a year, you must be so tough. And I go home and I turn the electric blanket on. But, Mawson's men, they lived in the era where they had that hardship. They, at home, I suppose they still had, the Tilly lantern, so they had the Tilly lantern in the hut. They had powdered milk at home and they'd have powdered milk in the hut. They lived on more stewy type foods than what we would eat today. They didn't have the lack in their diet and the cravings that I had for things like a takeaway chicken and hot chips because it didn't exist. They'd go into the backyard and kill a chicken and, cook it. So for Mawson's men, I feel that the transition of their day-to-day life to what our day-to-day life was, there wasn't that much of an extreme change. But for me, I really felt the deprivation and the loneliness. And I can remember writing in my diary saying, have I gone to prison and I've done something wrong because I'm being punished, because I'm sitting here in this icy cold box, torturing myself for a year and saying, wow, this is so good, I'm just really enjoying it. And I really think that, you see photos of Mawson's men and they're lying in their bunks and they're writing their diaries or they're sitting there just looking off into that distant nowhere. And I'm sure that the thoughts through their heads of, wow, what am I doing here? Wow, how lucky am I to be here? I should be enjoying this privilege. And I really would love to, I'd love to have a chat with them and see if they thought the same as I did. It's midwinter's day and I'm sitting in Mawson's hut. But I'm sitting in Mawson's hut in Hobart, not Mawson's hut in Commonwealth Bay. And it really does play with my mind. When I sit in the hut here and I just close my eyes and I hear the wind roaring past, it takes me straight back to the year that we actually spent living in this tiny box chained to rocks. Because every day we would look up Jacker and Jacker's diaries and see what Mawson did. And then we'd go, oh wow, it's the same wind conditions, it's the same, wildlife that would visit on set days. And he went, this is weird, there's been the time lapse of the 100 years, but everything is still the same, like the natural elements have not changed. And I think I still feel very close and very a part of Mawson's life, even though it sounds quite ridiculous. Being alongside Mawson's hut, it was an incredible opportunity to go and see it in all the different seasons. So when we first arrived, there were melt streams everywhere, all the artefacts were exposed. So you could actually walk around and it was like a living history lesson of seeing, oh, that's the bottle of wine that they drank at some stage. This is the chains off the dogs and there's the big tins of oats just sitting there. And then you'd look over and you'd see these beautiful Finesco boots sitting there because they'd thawed out in that summer. And then, you get to March and then the snows are starting to fall, and everything, like all the treasures, are starting to be hidden. So it's like everything was starting to go to sleep, and you're seeing the levels of the snow rise up above the hut. And then at one stage, the whole hut is just covered in snow, because believe it or not, the wind does stop at Commonwealth Bay sometimes. Even though it is the windiest place on earth, it can also be dead calm, and the winds come in from the east, and then suddenly there's this beautiful softness of snow over everything, and you can just stand up on a rock and you look out to sea, and there's no one else in the world that you can actually lay eyes on, and that's a really incredible thing to actually experience. And I think a secret plan I'd like to do is go back with a whole group of young people and overwinter again, and see if you could actually get through the amount of scientific programs that Mawson did through that year. And I don't reckon anyone could do it. I just think incredible effort. I dipped my lid, as they say.